Day 40. The ocean had erased the world. No land, no ships, no voices, just an 8-foot raft drifting in the Atlantic. And one man who refused to die. There is a point somewhere around the 40th day when the ocean stops being water and starts being something else entirely. It becomes the only thing that exists. It wraps around the edges of your mind the same way it wraps around the edges of the raft. And after long enough, you cannot remember what anything else looked like. The color green, a doorway, the face of your mother. These things dissolve slowly, like salt in the very water that is killing you, and all that remains is blue, a blue so deep and so endless that it begins to feel like a sound. Now, imagine that world, a wooden raft no longer than 8 feet, a square of planks and rope barely wide enough for a man to lie across. 8 feet, about the size of a kitchen table. That was his entire world now. A floating island smaller than a prison cell. No sail, no motor, no radio, just the Atlantic Ocean stretching out in every direction like the surface of another planet. And in the center of that raft, one man, thin, sunburned, alone. His name was Poon Lim, and he would stay on that raft for 133 days. To understand how he got there, you have to go back to November of 1942. The war was swallowing the world. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic in wolf packs, hunting Allied merchant ships with a ruthlessness that turned the ocean into a graveyard. Thousands of vessels were torpedoed. Thousands of sailors never came home. Poon Lim was a Chinese steward aboard the SS Ben Lomond, a British merchant ship carrying supplies across the Atlantic. He was 24 years old. He had taken the job because it paid. He had survived 2 previous torpedo attacks on other ships, which should have been enough warning for any man. But the pay was good, and jobs for Chinese sailors in wartime were scarce, so he signed on again. On November 23rd, 1942, somewhere in the South Atlantic, roughly 750 miles off the coast of the Amazon River, a German submarine locked onto the Ben Lomond. The torpedo struck without warning. The explosion ripped through the hull. Poon Lim later said the sound was beyond noise. It didn't enter through the ears. It entered through the bones. The ship buckled. Metal screamed. Water poured into compartments that had been dry seconds before. The Ben Lomond began to sink almost immediately. There were 55 men aboard. In the chaos, Poon Lim grabbed a life jacket and jumped. The water was warm, which surprised him. The ocean didn't feel like death. He swam hard, pulling himself away from the sinking ship, knowing that the downward suction of a large vessel could drag a swimmer beneath the surface like a hand pulling him into a grave. He kicked, he gasped. Behind him, the Ben Lomond groaned and tilted and slid beneath the waves, taking with it everything that had been real only minutes before. The galley where he had worked, the bunks where he had slept, the men he had spoken to that morning. He treaded water for hours. The life jacket kept him afloat, but the emptiness around him was incomprehensible. Wreckage bobbed nearby, oil slicked the surface, and then, drifting toward him through the debris, a life raft. One of the ship's emergency rafts, small and square and almost absurdly fragile against the scale of the ocean. He swam to it. He pulled himself aboard. He lay on his back, breathing hard, staring up at a sky that offered nothing. He waited for the others. He scanned the water for heads, for arms, for voices. None came. The ocean was silent. Of the 55 crew members aboard the Ben Lomond, not one other survivor was ever found. Poon Lim was alone. The raft carried a small supply of provisions, a few tins of biscuits, a jug of water, some chocolate, a bag of sugar, a couple of flares, a flashlight. He counted everything twice. He did the math in his head. If he rationed carefully, the food might last 30 days, the water less. He set himself a strict allowance, just enough to keep his body functioning, never enough to feel full. He told himself rescue would come. Ships crossed these waters. Planes flew overhead. Someone would see him. Someone would come. Days passed. No one came. The sun was relentless. It rose each morning and pressed down on him like a hot iron, blistering his skin, cracking his lips, turning the surface of the raft into something that burned to the touch. He draped his shirt over his head and shoulders, but it barely helped. By the end of the first week, his skin was raw and peeling. Salt sores opened on his legs and arms, stinging constantly, worsened by the spray of waves that washed over the raft at night. He could not escape the salt. It was in the air, on the wood, in the water that surrounded him. It ate at his skin the way the isolation ate at his mind. At night, the temperature dropped. The same ocean that tried to cook him during the day now chilled him until his teeth chattered. He curled into himself on the raft, shivering, listening to the vast dark sound of the water moving beneath him. Sometimes he heard things, voices, the hum of an engine. He would sit up, heart pounding, staring into the blackness. Nothing, just the ocean, breathing. When the rations began to run low, he knew he had a choice. He could wait for rescue and hope the food held out, or he could begin to feed himself from the sea. He chose the sea. He took apart one of the tins and bent the metal into a crude hook. He pulled threads from the hemp rope that held the raft together and braided them into a line. He used scraps of biscuit as bait, and he fished. The first catch came slowly. A small fish, barely bigger than his hand. He ate it raw. The taste was sharp, metallic, almost unbearable. But it was food. It was life. He ate every part of it, flesh, eyes, bones. He wasted nothing. Over the following days and weeks, Poon Lim transformed from a man waiting to be saved into a man saving himself. He developed a system. He learned which fish were attracted to the raft's shadow. He learned to dry strips of fish meat on the wooden surface to preserve them. He fashioned a larger hook from a nail he pried from the raft and used it to catch bigger fish. He collected rainwater in the canvas lining of the life jacket, drinking deeply when the storms came and storing what he could for the dry days that followed. He learned to catch birds. Seabirds would sometimes land on the raft, drawn by the fish scraps. He would sit motionless, barely breathing, waiting for one to come close enough. Then he would grab it. He killed the birds quickly, wringing their necks with hands that had grown thin and hard. He ate the meat raw. He used the innards as bait for bigger fish. He used the bones as tools. Nothing was discarded. Nothing was overlooked. One morning he hooked something large. The line went taut and the raft lurched sideways. He pulled and the water erupted. A small shark, maybe 4 feet long, thrashing and rolling, its mouth open, teeth flashing white against the dark water. He fought it for what felt like hours. His hands bled. The line cut into his palms. But he hauled it aboard, beat it with a water jug until it stopped moving, and cut it open with the edge of a flattened tin. He dried the flesh. The shark fed him for days. But the ocean was not only a source of food, it was also a predator. Larger sharks circled the raft regularly, their dorsal fins cutting the surface in slow arcs. At night he could feel them bumping against the underside of the wood. The raft was fragile, a few planks, some rope. If a large enough shark struck it hard enough, the whole thing would come apart. He tried not to think about that. He tried not to think about many things. Storms came without warning. The sky would darken in the space of an hour, the wind would rise, and then the sea would turn into something monstrous. Waves taller than the raft lifted him up and dropped him down into troughs so deep the horizon disappeared. He lashed himself to the raft with rope and held on. Water poured over him, filling his mouth, his nose, his eyes. The raft spun and tilted and threatened to flip. He held on. He always held on. When the storms passed, he would lie gasping on the soaked wood, trembling, alive. The hardest enemy was not the ocean. It was time. Days blurred into each other. He lost track of the date. He counted days by scratching marks into the wood, but even that became uncertain. The sun rose and set, and nothing changed. The horizon never moved. No land appeared. No ship came. The sameness was a kind of torture, more brutal than the hunger or the thirst. His mind drifted. He spoke aloud to himself, just to hear a human voice. He recited things he remembered from his childhood. Songs, phrases, numbers. He invented routines, small rituals to mark the passage of time, to convince himself the days were not all the same day repeating endlessly. Twice he saw ships. The first time, he screamed and waved until his throat was raw. The ship passed on the horizon like a ghost, oblivious, indifferent. It shrank, it vanished. He sat down on the raft and stared at the place where it had been. The second time, a ship came closer. He could make out details, the hull, the smokestacks. He stood and waved. He used his last flare. The bright light arced into the sky and hung there, burning. The ship did not stop, it did not turn. It continued on, growing smaller, until it was gone. There was no water to waste on tears. After 3 months on the raft, his body was failing. His muscles had withered. His ribs stood out beneath skin that was burned nearly black by the sun. His legs were covered in sores. His gums bled. His vision blurred at the edges. Moving from one side of the raft to the other required effort that left him panting. He spent most of his time lying still, conserving energy, watching the sky, waiting for clouds that might bring rain, waiting for fish that might swim close enough to catch. He thought about death, not with fear, not even with sadness, more with a kind of quiet curiosity. He wondered if it would come as sleep, if he would simply close his eyes one evening and not open them again. He wondered if the ocean would take him gently or violently. He wondered if anyone back home even knew he was missing. He wondered if anyone was looking. He decided, in a way that required no dramatic resolution, that he would not give up, not because he believed rescue would come, not because he had faith in anything larger than himself, but because his body was still breathing, his hands could still grip a fishing line, his mouth could still swallow water when the rain came. As long as those things were true, he would continue. It was not heroism. It was something smaller and quieter than that. It was simply the decision to keep going for one more day, made over and over again, 133 times. On April 5th, 1943, after more than 4 months alone on the open ocean, Poon Lim saw something on the horizon that did not look like a ship. It looked like land, a low dark shape that did not move. He blinked, he wiped his eyes. It was still there. And then, closer, much closer, a small fishing boat. Brazilian fishermen working the waters near the mouth of the Amazon. They spotted the raft. They turned toward it. At first he thought it was another hallucination. He had seen shapes before, ships that vanished, voices that weren't real. He blinked. The shape was still there. Not a wave, not a cloud. Land. He heard voices. Real voices. Not the ones the ocean had invented for him during the long nights. These were rough, loud, human voices calling out in Portuguese, a language he did not speak. The boat drew alongside the raft. Hands reached down, strong hands, warm hands. They gripped his arms and pulled him upward. His legs buckled. He could not stand. He weighed barely 90 pounds. They laid him in the bottom of the boat. Someone gave him water. Someone gave him food. He looked up at their faces, at the sky beyond them, at the mast of the boat rocking gently against the clouds. And for the first time in 133 days, the horizon had something in it. Poon Lim survived longer alone at sea than any person ever recorded. The Royal Navy studied his methods and incorporated his survival techniques into their training manuals. King George VI personally presented him with a medal. When told that he hoped no one would ever have to break the record, Poon Lim replied quietly that he hoped so too. He never went to sea again. The ocean gave him back. But it kept something. Some part of him stayed out there on that raft, drifting, still watching the horizon.